Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss where the Conservatives are likely to be headed from this point. The absolute skip fire of a response after the recent local elections shows that the Tories, both the swivel-eyed loons and the pragmatic ones, do not seem interested in putting up any sort of serious fight for votes next year. But it also seems clear that it will be some time before they shake themselves out of their complacency, even when they are relegated to the opposition benches. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So in the wake of the local elections, according to reports, Keir Starmer told his MPs about the importance of being united and focused on planning for government, with attention being spent on healthcare, education and energy. But the Tories, he said, are responding by holding a series of Mad Hatter's tea parties, carnivals of conspiracy and blame, he called them, referring to, first of all, the Boris Johnson cult, the Democratic Conservative Organisation. Was it the Conservative Democratic Organisation? The Boris Johnson fan club holding their meeting last Saturday. And then, of course, we've had the National Conservatism Conference over the first few days of this week. You know, Angela Rayner echoed the same sentiments in PMQs earlier this week, not too dissimilar to my own descriptions. Being clear, neither of these loony conventions being held in the last week were specifically Conservative Party conferences. You know, the first, as I say, was a group therapy session for Boris Johnson cultists. The second was funded by an American far-right organisation. But not only have Conservative MPs, as well as other prominent members of the party, been in attendance and speaking, I have seen no major pushback publicly from what you might consider the moderate wing of the party. The closest was Michael Gove, if you can call him moderate, who also spoke at the convention and said that the Conservatives cannot win with culture wars, but must focus on the economy and public service. And you go, well, yes, that's true enough. But just like when a Tory MP says something practical on any subject, they're hardly backed up by a chorus of colleagues. In fact, Gove's attendance at the event even drew public criticism from one of his own MPs, Jake Berry, who's Liz Truss's former Tory party chair, I think. He was slagging off Michael Gove, one of the most senior members of this party in government. This is an incredibly disunited party, and it's disunited in favour of the extremists. Gove and Sunak are criticised very publicly by Tory MPs. Braverman is not. Even Tory MPs who disagree with her are not criticising her publicly. Now think about what that tells you. The Prime Minister can be attacked by his own MPs very publicly. We know who they are. There's no unattributed comments. We know who they are. But the swivel-eyed loons in Cabinet, whenever we hear that there's a Tory MP said something against them, it's always anonymous. This is dysfunctional and incredibly self-defeating for the Tories. There have been some rather extreme ideas promoted by some of the speakers, yet we haven't seen a gaggle of Tory MPs attempting to distance their party from the gatherings. Why not? The same reason they didn't put up a fight against the obviously damaging Brexit or against Boris Johnson's more extreme behaviour until it became too much. They fear splitting the party. The swivel-eyed loons are splitting the party, but they fear doing it themselves because it's splitting anyway. They're like a parent, you know, when their little brats being a bell end in public, just smiling and laughing at others around them instead of dealing with it, because they don't know how to deal with it. And if the bulk of Tory MPs are either too weak or too apathetic to pull their party back from the edge of the abyss, those Tory MPs supporting these conventions will drag it over. Right now, the Conservatives are not on course to win the next election. It is very hard to see how they even limit the damage. Suella Braverman's personal approval rating, which was already very bad, took a further hit in the last week. So her culture wars are not even doing her any personal good in terms of public popularity. You know, even if Conservatives can see no way to win next year, shouldn't they at least be making sure they win, I don't know, something like 250 seats in order to give them a chance at a quick comeback? Right now, it's hard to see them doing any better than Labour did in 2019, and it is entirely possible they will do worse even than that. Sunak is too weak to focus his party on what the public find important, much less actually implement policies which would appeal to key voters. It remains to be seen if he's even got the strength to force Suella Braverman to behave herself. Currently, the evidence would suggest not. And she's not going to self-regulate. Maybe Sunak doesn't care that much. Just make his family as rich as possible in the time he has left and go and do something else afterwards. What has happened is that Sunak allowed his government to throw its weight behind culture wars, not because they thought it was the right strategy, but to appease the extreme wing of his party. Now it's failed. It's delivered worse than expected local election results. The same extreme wing, which forced entirely the wrong strategy on him, are now attacking Sunak over the failure which was caused by their policies. This is what happens when you appease instead of showing some backbone. I remember the Tory party conference last year. This was when Liz Truss was still Prime Minister. Braverman was speaking to delegates, pushing policies that were in direct contradiction to Truss's stated direction of travel. What did Truss do about that? Nothing. Yes, I know she sacked her in the end. That was for something entirely different. That was for risking national security. That was nothing to do with enforcing party discipline. And then what did Sunak do? Immediately hired her back into the same role and hasn't shown any signs of trying to shorten her leash at all. Braverman wants to be the next party leader. And here's where the party is even more dysfunctional. Braverman's interests are not aligned with those of her party. See, the Conservative Party, you would think, wants to win the next election. That's what's in the interest of the Conservative Party, winning the next election. That's not what Braverman wants. Because if the Conservatives win the next election, Sunak not only remains leader, but he will be emboldened to take action against those who refuse to back him. Braverman will be gone. She can't be gone at the moment because Sunak is clearly fearful of the rebellion she would lead against him. Winning a general election, however, especially one against the odds, and my goodness, it's against the odds at the moment, that would see his party swing behind him as some sort of miracle worker. Oh, there'll be no talk about Johnson, the electoral winning machine then. Oh no, Rishi Sunak will be the golden boy. The authority it would bestow on him would allow him to do whatever he wanted. He could bring whoever he wanted into cabinet and chuck whoever he wanted onto the backbenchers. Braverman would be out the airlock at the first sign of trouble. Boris Johnson got away with quite a lot for quite a long time, partly because there wasn't a good leader to replace him, as we've seen since, but also partly because his election win won a lot of backers. A Tory win is the last thing Braverman wants, does her no good at all. It would cement Sunak's authority for years to come, and he would immediately remove her from government, never mind just cabinet. So her interests are not aligned with either her leader or her party. She wants to engineer circumstances which will allow her to become leader, just as Sunak tried to do when undermining Johnson. But whereas Sunak has support within the parliamentary party, Braverman doesn't really seem to have that much. She may have enough to stop Sunak governing, but she doesn't have enough to govern herself. She's also, as I say, not popular with the general public. So neutral MPs are not likely to swing behind her as someone who can unite voters. But that won't matter. Braverman doesn't need anything like a majority of Tory MPs on her side to become the next leader. Liz Truss didn't have much support after all. Consider what will happen after the next general election. For a start, most of the current Tory MPs will be gone. Some are standing down. Many more will fight but ultimately lose their seats. Who emerges to lead the party will be partly down to which influential MPs survive the devastation of that election. Braverman will certainly survive. She has been formally made the candidate of a very safe seat, just as well given her personal popularity. This seat is so safe that if the Tories were reduced to double figures of MPs, she would still be one of them. The election result is likely to do a couple of things in her favour. First, wipe out a large number of Tory MPs opposed to her. Yes, it will wipe out some allies as well, but not as many. Second, whenever either the Conservatives or Labour lose the election, they tend to conclude that they need to do something radically different without ever bothering to have a proper review. It happened, with Labour in 2010. No one actually thought to ourselves, did we maybe just run a bad campaign? No, it's because we get everything wrong. All those 13 years were completely wrong. We need to do something completely different. All very knee-jerk. It'll be the same for the Tories. Some in the party will argue that they were too crazy and need to focus on voters again. These will be ignored. After all, wasn't the non-crazy option Rishi Sunak? And if he failed, then those arguing, actually, no, we needed to be even crazier, they will win the debate. You can already see the arguments appearing at this week's Swivel-Eyed Loon convention. Cancel net zero, ban abortions, cancel all human rights laws, the abolition of visas for anyone who doesn't donate at least £1 million to the Conservative Party, blah, 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 blah. And to become the next leader, Braverman doesn't need to be backed by the majority of remaining Tory MPs. She needs to be appointed chief loony. That's it. Because consider, the 4 times when the Conservatives have selected a new leader, the last 4 times, all of them as it happens when they've been in power, but the last 4 times they've chosen a new leader, Theresa May and Rishi Sunak were the pragmatic choices, even if not exactly effective. Tory MPs coalesced around their choice and stopped the wider party membership from selecting, because they said, no, we're going to have a single candidate. We're all going to agree on a candidate, and that's who it's going to be. So they got their pragmatic choice. With Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, the Swivel-Eyed Loon leaders, they were both on a ticket against what was considered the sane pragmatic choice, which went to members. In other words, when the party members were asked to pick between pragmatism and lunacy, they reliably and predictably picked lunacy. They will do so again. They'll have learnt nothing. The only ways the Tories can avoid picking Braverman or someone equally extreme is to make sure the leadership contest is whittled down to 2 pragmatic choices. This is so unlikely as to be laughable. Their only other choice is to fix the election rules to have just one contestant, as they did in the case of Rishi Sunak. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think the chaos of losing the election will be such they will just revert to the normal rules. In fact, it's perfectly possible that the final 2 candidates which go to the party members may well be 2 representatives of the extreme wing. Because although it might look like the Conservatives are split between pragmatic moderates and the extreme right, it's not quite true. There are actually multiple factions. The far right itself is split into at least 2 bits. This could actually mean that the Tories promote clearly unsuitable leaders twice at least, before returning to rational thought. They might make the champion of one loony faction leader first, and when they get hammered in the election, go for the other. In many ways, it could well be the right-wing version of what happened to Labour in both 2010, 2015. The Labour Party selected the candidate that was more ideologically appealing, rather than the one considered to be the most competent and the most likely to win an election. We only selected the pragmatic choice after a decade of being in opposition, when we were a bit tired of losing elections. We may well see the same mentality for the Conservatives, and we may well see it for as long from the Conservatives. I just hope that by the time the Conservatives are fed up with being in opposition and decide to stop being complacent, that Labour doesn't start after being in power for an equally comfortable amount of time without any serious opposition. I have more faith than any time in the past that serious electoral reform will come, but even if it's planned, and I can't know whether it is or it is not, it needs to happen before it's too late. I've already run through these lengthy Labour Conservative periods where they take it in turns to treat elections seriously 3 times. Statistically, I'm due at least another 2, maybe even 3, before I shuffle off this mortal coil, assuming we don't go back to short periods in government like the 60s and 70s. I mean, I don't mind the next phase, with Labour in the ascendancy, but I really can't be arsed with the one after. And it will be the fear of the one after which will stop me enjoying the one coming next year if we don't actually change things for good next time. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.